was the 9th night of the war at Kurukshetra, the exact midpoint of the legendary 18-day bloodbath. Not the start, not the end, but the middle. The war had been inconclusive. Sometimes the Kauravas led by the old sire Bhishma had the upper hand. Sometimes the Pandavas led by the young warlord Drishtadyumna, Draupadi's twin brother, had the upper hand. A seesaw that was going nowhere. By then, Lord Krishna knew that to change the course of battle in Pandava's favor, they had to kill Bhishma. But Bhishma could not be killed because of his father's boon, that he could choose the time of his own death. There was only one way, to use Shikhandi as a shield. A woman on the battlefield? Sneered all 5 Pandavas, somewhat conveniently forgetting that they themselves worshipped the warrior goddess Durga. Shikhandi, the soldier caught up in this debate, was born Shikhandini. She was a daughter of King Draupada, an elder sister of Draupadi, who married all 5 of Pandava brothers. Although she was born a female, Shikhandini was raised as a man. She was taught warfare and statecraft. At this point, it is important for our listeners to hear the story of Shikhandi's reincarnation. Let's begin the story. Chitrangad, the son of Satyavati, was killed in battle with the Gandharvas. As he died childless, his brother Vichitravirya was the rightful heir and was duly crowned king. And as he was a minor, Bhishma governed the kingdom in his name till he came of age. When Vichitravirya reached adolescence, Bhishma cast about for a bride for him. And as he heard that the daughters of the king of Kashi were to choose their husbands according to the ancient Kshatriya practice, he went there to secure them for his brother. The rulers of Kosla, Vanga, Pundra, Kalinga, and other princes and potentates had repaired to Kashi for the Swamvara, attired in their best. The princesses were so far famed for beauty and accomplishments that there was fierce competition to win them. Bhishma was famous among the Kshatriyas as a mighty man at arms. At first, everyone thought that the redoubtable hero had come merely to witness the festivities of the Swamvara. But when they found that he was also a suitor, the young prince felt themselves let down and were full of chagrin. They did not know that he had really come for the sake of his brother Vichitravirya. The princess began to cast affronts at Bhishma. This was excellent and wise descendant of the Bharata race forgets that he's too old and forgets also his vow of celibacy. What has this old man to do with this Swamvara? Fie on him! The princesses, who were to choose their husbands, barely glanced at the old man and looked away. Bhishma's wrath flamed up. He challenged the assembled princes to the trial of their manhood and defeated them all, and taking the 3 princesses in his chariot, he set out for Hastinapur. But before he had gone far, Salva, the king of Saubala country, who was attached to Amba, intercepted and opposed him, for that princess had mentally chosen Salva as her husband. After a bitter fight, Salva was worsted, and no wonder, as Bhishma was a peerless bowman, but at the request of the princesses, Bhishma spared his life. Arriving in Hastinapur with the princesses, Bhishma made preparations for their marriage to Vichitravirya. When all were assembled for the marriage, Amba smiled mockingly at Bhishma and addressed him as follows. O son of Ganga, you are aware what is enjoined in the scriptures. I have mentally chosen Salva, the king of Saubala, as my husband. You have brought me here by force. Knowing this, do what you, learned in the scriptures, should do. Bhishma admitted the force of her objection and sent her to Salva with a proper escort. The marriage of Ambika and Ambalika, the two younger sisters, with Vichitravirya was duly solemnized. Amba went rejoicing to Salva and told him what had happened. I have mentally chosen you as my husband from the very start. Bhishma has sent me to you. Marry me according to the Shastras. Salva replied, Bhishma defeated me in sight of all and carried you away. I have been disgraced, so I cannot receive you as my wife. Return to him and do as he commands. With these words, Salva sent her back to Bhishma. She returned to Hastinapur and told Bhishma of what had taken place. The grandsire tried to induce Vichitravirya to marry her, but Vichitravirya roundly refused to marry a maiden whose heart had already been given to another. Amba then turned to Bhishma and besought him to marry her himself, as there was no other recourse. It was impossible for Bhishma to break his vow. Sorry as he was for Amba, and after some vain attempts to make Vichitravirya change his mind, he told her there was no way left to her but to go again to Salva and seek to persuade him. This at first she was too proud to do, and for long years she abode in Hastinapur. Finally, in sheer desperation, she went to Salva and found him adamant in refusal. The lotus-eyed Amba spent 6 bitter years in sorrow and baffled hope, and her heart was seared with sufferings, and all the sweetness in her turned to gall and fierce hatred towards Bhishma as the cause of her blighted life. She sought in vain for a champion among the princes to fight and kill Bhishma and thus avenge her wrongs, but even the foremost warriors were afraid of Bhishma and paid no heed to her appeal. At last, she resorted to hard austerities to get the grace of Lord Subramanya. He graciously appeared before her and gave her a garland of ever-fresh lotus, saying that the wearer of that garland would become the enemy of Bhishma. Amba took the garland and again besought every Kshatriya to accept the garland gift of the 6-faced Lord and to champion her cause. But no one had the hardihood to antagonize Bhishma. Finally, she went to King Draupada, who also refused to grant her prayer. She then hung the garland at Draupada's palace gate and went away to the forest. Some ascetics whom she met there and to whom she told her sorrowful tale advised her to go to Parshurama as a suppliant. She followed their advice. On hearing her sad story, Parashurama was moved with compassion and said, Dear child, what do you want? I can ask Salva to marry you if you wish it. Amba said, No, I do not wish it. I no longer desire marriage or home or happiness. There is now but one thing in life for me, revenge on Bhishma. Only boon I seek is the death of Bhishma. Parashurama, moved as much by her anguish as by his abiding hatred of the Kshatriya race, espoused her cause and fought with Bhishma. It was long and equal combat between the two greatest men-at-arms of the age, but in the end Parashurama had to acknowledge defeat. He told Amba, I've done all that I could, and I have failed. Throw yourself on the mercy of Bhishma. That is the only course left to you." Consumed with grief and rage, and kept alive only by the passion for revenge, Amba went to the Himalayas and practiced rigorous austerities to get the grace of Shiva. Now that all human aid had failed her, Shiva appeared before her and granted her a boon, that in her next birth she would slay Bhishma. Amba was impatient for that rebirth which would give her her heart's desire. She made a pyre and plunged into the fire, pouring out the flame in her heart into the scarcely hotter blaze of the pyre. By the grace of Lord Shiva, Amba was born as the daughter of King Draupada. A few years after her birth, she saw the garland of never-fading flowers that still hung at the palace gate and had remained there untouched by anyone through fear. She put it round her neck. Her father Draupada was in consternation at her temerity, which he feared would draw on his head the wrath of Bhishma. He sent his daughter in exile out of the capital to the forest. She practiced austerities in the forest and in time was transformed into a male and became known as the warrior Shikhandi. With Shikhandi as his charioteer, Arjuna attacked Bhishma on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Bhishma knew that Shikhandi was born as female, and true to his code of chivalry, he would not fight him under any circumstance. So it was that Arjuna could fight screened by Shikhandi and conquer Bhishma, especially because Bhishma knew that his long and weary probation on earth was finished and consented to be vanquished. As the arrows struck Bhishma in his last fight, he singled out those which had pierced him deepest and said, "This is Arjuna's arrow and not Shikhandi's." So fell this great warrior. The end. The story of Amba and Bhishma by C. Rajagopalchari has been brought to you by Cultural Cafe. Cultural Cafe is an initiative that strives to narrate the stories of our nation's diversity. It hopes to build bridges, to keep kindness, common ground, inclusion, and empathy alive through storytelling. Please support Culture Cafe by liking, subscribing, or commenting. Thank you.